Javier Bardem, fresh out of a 17-year prison sentence, is currently using a kind of twisted mastery of the law to terrorize Amy Adams and Patrick Wilson. Apple dropped this massive Scorsese-backed thriller yesterday, June 5, 2026. They are using prestige Hollywood violence as the bait to drag you into a sort of inescapable hardware and software ecosystem trap. We are looking at a fundamentally altered storyline from the original novel, where both Tom and Anna Boden acted as his defense attorneys nearly 2 decades ago. The sheer gravity of this cast.
Charging $12.99 a month is the automatic financial mechanism Apple activates the second your trial expires. The entire subscription model relies heavily on user inertia. Millions of credit cards sit on file waiting for the seventh day to pass.
Signing up for a free trial to binge 10 episodes before the paywall drops feels like trying to outrun a financial bear trap. You grab the content and, pray you can pull your leg out before the steel jaws snap shut on your billing cycle.
The streaming industry builds revenue models entirely around the psychological friction of canceling a service. Consumers consistently overestimate their ability to remember a recurring charge.
They know precisely how fast you run. They designed the release schedule to sort of make escape impossible. Apple released the first 2 episodes yesterday, titled Fingers and Toes and Why Would I Want to Hurt You? The company developed a very specific habit of pushing episodes live at 9 p.m. Eastern Time the night before the official release dates.
Releasing content early generates immediate evening engagement on social media platforms. Training the consumer to treat the interface as a daily destination replaces the traditional weekly appointment viewing habit. Users check the application on Thursday night, hoping for an unannounced drop.
Creating an artificial sense of exclusivity rewards the viewers who obsessively refresh their screens.
Generating that daily destination trap relies heavily on the pedigree of the production. Martin Scorsese and Steven Spielberg are executive producing this adaptation. They draw a direct line back to their 1991 collaboration, where Robert De Niro played the terrifying Max Cady.
They also pull from J. Lee Thompson's 1962 original film starring Robert Mitchum. Both of those classic movies are actually sitting over on Amazon Prime Video currently, available to rent. Apple even allows Amazon Prime members to subscribe to Apple TV directly inside the Prime Video interface. I find that kind of bizarre. Apple fiercely defends their walled garden. Why would they let a massive competitor host their streaming feed and take a cut of the revenue?
Integrating with a massive competitor expands their top-of-funnel reach drastically. Capturing the Amazon user base secures the identical monthly subscription fee without forcing the user to download a new application.
Bypassing the friction of an app installation secures the credit card on file much faster.
Amazon already holds the payment credentials for hundreds of millions of users. Apple sacrifices a small percentage of the subscription fee to eliminate the activation energy required to start a new trial.
They drop 1 episode a week after this initial premiere. Episode 3, Phantom Sensations, lands on June 12th. Episode 4, Pierced, hits June 19th. They drag this narrative out across 2 entirely separate billing cycles. The finale does not air until July 31.
Pushing a 10-episode thriller deep into midsummer forces the viewer far past the 7-day free trial.
Staggering a release schedule like this feels like a hostage negotiation where your credit card is the captive. They hand over the first 2 episodes as proof of life, then demand a monthly ransom to see how the story ends for the Boden children, Natalie and Zach.
Abandoning the binge model forces prolonged retention across the platform. Securing a minimum of 2 billing cycles from any viewer determined to watch the narrative conclusion becomes the default outcome. This strategy mirrors their aggressive entry into the streaming market in November 2019.
They launched Apple TV Plus at $4.99 a month and, handed out free 1-year subscriptions with hardware purchases back then. Training the consumer base to value the content took years of artificial subsidization. You sit on the couch to watch this gripping thriller, but the way you actually interact with the show is undergoing a massive alteration. Cape Fear functions as a high-profile stress test for Apple's upcoming software overhaul.
Staring down the barrel of tvOS 27 reveals the actual engineering priorities. Apple is unveiling this operating system at the Worldwide Developers Conference next week, starting June 8. The community is buzzing about the flagship accessibility upgrade. They call it larger text.
Squinting at the default Apple TV menu from the couch feels like trying to decipher a prescription bottle from across a dimly lit room. You just want to read the synopsis for Episode 5, Faith, without, getting up and walking toward the screen.
Increasing the typographic scale within the operating system solves a primary user complaint. Providing multiple text size options dramatically improves the legibility of on-screen menus and episode descriptions. Users sit at varying distances from their displays.
A font size appearing perfectly legible on a desk monitor becomes completely unreadable from a couch 15 feet away. The community response to this announcement is fascinating. Users on forums are actually incredibly cynical about this update.
A user named Sean sarcastically called it a game changer. Another named Victor stated he hates the timeline where we get excited about larger text. Daniel begged them to add functional features, like random movie pickers or custom screensavers instead.
Why is such a basic feature causing so much friction among the user base?
Apple's dynamic type framework dictates the rendering of these interface elements natively. Developers must use Apple's specific coding tools to draw the words on the screen. The larger text setting exclusively controls applications built entirely within that native framework.
Wait, clarify that for me. Third-party developers like Netflix and Amazon Prime Video deploy proprietary rendering engines to display their own interfaces. Why would Netflix refuse to use the built-in Apple code? Does it cost them money?
Retaining control over the user interface guarantees cross-platform consistency. The Netflix menu looks identical on an Apple TV or a PlayStation because they write their own display code instead of relying on the host machine.
The larger text setting completely ignores those competitor applications because the Apple operating system cannot inject font scaling into software it does not control. Apple solves a frustrating problem only if you stay exclusively inside their applications. The software is arriving this fall, but the hardware running it remains suspiciously absent.
Bloomberg's Mark Gurman reported that a new Apple TV 4K set-top box is nearly ready to go. The physical hardware is finished, and, like sitting in a warehouse, they're sitting on physical inventory.
Yeah.
Delaying the product launch directly correlates to the development of Apple Intelligence.
Refusing to ship new hardware until the revamped Siri architecture achieves stability in iOS 27 shows a demand for parity across their voice assistant ecosystem. Launching a new device featuring an outdated voice assistant contradicts their entire marketing strategy for the year.
They want Siri to be the primary navigation tool for the television. We saw this with the introduction of continuity camera in tvOS 17. They turned the iPhone into a webcam for FaceTime calls on the big screen.
They keep sort of bolting on these advanced features. Forum users point out that even if Siri is 3 times better than the current version, it still has a terrible reputation to overcome. Asking the television to rewind 15 seconds routinely results in the voice assistant, playing a random song from Apple Music.
Equipping the rumored Apple TV 4K with an A17 Pro chip injects an unprecedented level of computational power into a streaming device. The A17 Pro is the exact silicon architecture powering their high-end smartphones.
Back up. Why would Apple put an A17 Pro chip into a plastic box just to make the text bigger and process Siri voice requests? Am I missing something? The 2022 third-generation model already runs on the A15 Bionic chip. It handles 4K HDR playback flawlessly.
A basic, cheap processor manages streaming menus easily. Putting a smartphone brain capable of running complex artificial intelligence into a device designed to stream Javier Bardem constitutes massive hardware overkill. Accusing Apple of hardware overkill exposes their underlying ambition.
They intend to resurrect their failed gaming console strategy. The history of Apple TV as a gaming platform reviews a decade of embarrassing missteps. They mandated that developers build games around the original Siri remote's gyroscope back in 2015.
Forcing studios to design simplistic, frustrating control schemes using a tiny pane of glass alienated traditional gamers immediately. I remember the App Store arriving with the 4th-generation model. That was the moment they tried to push gaming.
They brought Crossy Road to the stage. They actively fought with developers over MFI controller support for, years. What did MFI even stand for in that context?
Made for iOS covers the entire accessory ecosystem. Forcing hardware manufacturers to pay licensing fees and embed specific authentication chips to receive that certification created a massive barrier to entry. Game developers refused to port their title to the Apple TV because users did not own compatible controllers.
They brought Minecraft to the platform and watched it fail miserably due to these specific friction points. Powering those early gaming ambitions with the weak A8 and A10X chips severely limited graphical fidelity.
The hardware simply lacked the processing bandwidth to render complex, three-dimensional environments at acceptable frame rates. In 2021, they upgraded the internal chip but completely removed the gyroscope and accelerometer from the redesigned Siri remote.
They broke compatibility with their own early game catalog. Users had to track down the old remote just to play the games they already purchased. You also mentioned a massive software bottleneck earlier. Why do applications on tvOS operate under a strict 4 GB install size limit?
Instituting aggressive software bottlenecks suffocates the developer ecosystem. A 4 GB limitation prevents the deployment of modern graphical assets and high-resolution textures. Modern console games routinely require 60 to 100 gigabytes of storage just to launch.
Apple treats the television box as a thin streaming client rather than a dedicated computing device. They enforce a pathetic 500 kilobytes of persistent on-device storage. Developers write more data, but the operating system randomly deletes that written storage whenever it decides to free up space.
These devices ship with 64 or 128 gigabytes of internal capacity. The hardware has the room. Treating the device as a thin client aligns with their historical obsession with forcing users into a cloud-based ecosystem.
Pushing data to iCloud servers reduces local dependency. Forcing modern game engines to operate within a 500 kilobyte save limit prevents the local retention of complex game states and downloaded textures. They want the device streaming data continuously rather than hoarding files on the local drive.
Deleting and re-downloading game data every time you boot up the console feels like renting a luxury apartment but being forced to move your furniture out onto the street every single night. You have massive square footage inside, but the landlord throws your belongings in the garbage while you sleep.
You haul the couch back upstairs just to, play the game again. It makes zero sense for a high-end gaming experience.
Integrating the A17 Pro chip fundamentally alters the physical capabilities of the machine. This architecture natively supports hardware-accelerated ray tracing. Ray tracing algorithms simulate the physical behavior of light to render realistic shadows and reflections in real time.
Walk me through the actual visuals on the screen.
Calculating the trajectory of millions of virtual light beams creates highly accurate reflections in a puddle of water or authentic shadows creeping across a dark hallway. Processing those calculations previously required massive, expensive gaming PCs, drawing massive amounts of electricity.
Embedding this technology into a tiny plastic box sort of bridges the graphical gap between mobile devices and traditional home consoles. Apple spent the last 2 years developing their game porting toolkit to translate high-end PC titles to Apple Silicon.
They are concurrently rumored to, launch a dedicated Apple Games application for tvOS. The timing is incredible. Current global memory shortages drive up the manufacturing costs of traditional gaming hardware. Finding a cheap console is difficult.
A high-powered Apple TV sitting under the television becomes an accidental rival to Xbox and PlayStation. Casual gamers might just pair a Bluetooth controller to the box they already use to watch Javier Bardem. They dangle Assassin's Creed Mirage and Resident Evil Village as the future of Apple Silicon.
Will Apple actually lift the 4 GB installation cap, or will they stubbornly force developers to cram massive game worlds into impossibly small digital boxes?
The master plan operates entirely outside the view of the consumer. You sit down to watch a free trial of a sun-drenched, blood-soaked thriller. You just want to, see if Anna and Tom Bowden survive their tormentor.
Swapping out your operating system happens entirely in the background. They update your living room hardware to process advanced artificial intelligence. They quietly transform your basic television setup into a sort of stealth gaming console capable of rendering ray-traced graphics.
Controlling the content layer provides the necessary distraction to execute a total hardware and software infiltration of the living room. Go look at the little black box sitting under your television currently. Ask yourself if you will be playing Assassin's Creed on it by Christmas. Watch where you step.